everybody, it's Romania Black, and, So, we're on episode 19 of Vinland Saga, and apparently the last episode has caused quite a bit of a stir. So, we were talking in the Discord about it, how, no news can be good news, but also there's no such thing as bad press, right? So, even though there's been a lot of debate sparked, and we'll go into that before we start episode 19 and 18.5, which I have pulled up, there's been a lot of people being like, what do we think of Kettle and all this? How do we, go about determining and judging Kettle? What do we do? How do we move forward from this? And I've got thoughts, and there's lots of comments I want to talk about. There's a thread on Twitter I want to bring up. And then obviously we have 18.5 before we even start episode 19. So this is going to be a long intro, just to forewarn you. But I do agree with the people on Discord that are like, all of this discussion and debate, regardless of what it does with your faith in humanity, it does make it to where that press hopefully will reach the studios and be like, hey, let's go ahead and greenlight season 3 of Vinland Saga. And I would absolutely love that. That would give me so much joy if we greenlit that series. And I'm going to hide this toy from my dog so he does not ask for it while we're discussing things. You should see his face. He's mad at me. But I do have some comments I want to go to before I talk about the thread and talk about some lingering words and thoughts about Kettle before we go into 18.5 and episode 19. Alex Johnson talked about how this season creates this false sense of security. And yeah, I think that so many people were kind of against the fact that it was so different than season 1. Season 1 was just like action upon action, and the downplayed moments and subtleties were kind of like in between in little pockets. And here it's the exact opposite, where we have all these downplayed, quiet, serious moments, and the violence kind of gets spurted into the scenes. And so it seems like we get led into this false sense of security where we get kind of comfortable with the fact that, oh, nothing bad's going to happen. And that makes the scene with Arnheid and Kettle in the last episode just hit like a ton of bricks and have that much more impact. So I'm glad you pointed that out, Alex. Woosh and Sweebian talks about how earlier in the season we see Kettle, who decides that he doesn't want to use violence to punish children for stealing from him. But then later, as all of his anxieties and all of his insecurities mount, he ends up feeling betrayed by Arnheid, and thus kind of that reaches his breaking point. And Wish and Sweetman was talking about how if the Arnheid arc hadn't happened in the manga, because I guess some people are saying that like the Arnheid Gardar arc isn't necessary, which I'm like, what? She was saying that because of that arc, it allows Kettle to reach that breaking point. Otherwise, Kettle may have submitted to Canute. He may have been like, you know what, fine, just use my farm, it's okay. But now he's so worked up and he's so over the edge that he's just like, no, we're going to fight back against Canute, even if we're going to lose. And so the arc does represent something to the plot of spurring Kettle to get to that point, right? So I thought that was good to point out. Also, Bug-Eye's voice actor is relatively new to the industry. He's done a few things like Blue Period, and he's been in a couple other anime that I'm not familiar with, but he's relatively new. He does a good job. I like Bug-Eyes. Alexander Q had this really interesting note in their comment about how the idea of Gardar smearing the blood on the child's face that we saw at the beginning of season 2 and then later in the last, in episode 17, the idea is that it's this idea of like corruption and sin against something pure. And it reminded me of Canute's whole thing back in season 1 where Canute was like, oh, humanity was given all of the earth, but they became corrupt and ruined it. And God kind of said, peace out. And at least in Canute's eyes, that's the case. And I was like, that's a really interesting connection between that imagery we've seen in season 2 and Canute's view on humanity and being left behind by faith and by God. I thought that was a really interesting connection. It doesn't seem like it's connected, but you could make that thread between the two things. So I thought that was cool, Alexander Q. And then, yeah, Alex Cornejo had a really, really good comment. And I'm going to save their comment until I talk about this Twitter thread. I have a link to it down below. But this Twitter thread popped up, and it said no manga spoilers. And I took a chance. I was like, okay, I'll trust this. Seems legit. And so it's from at Vincent5126. And I've been told that a lot of their other posts have manga spoilers for other series. So I probably won't be looking too much into their posts. But this one was really, really good. And it spoke what I kind of wanted to say in the last episode, and they worded it so well. So it's about Kettle the Loser, the reality of moral privilege. And I'm going to say this verbatim because I think they wrote it so well. So you can see the link down below to see the images that are tied with it. But saying this thread examines the importance of Ketil in anime-manga as discourse as a whole, with Yukimura using a medieval example of modern reality of moral privilege, the silent, indirect benefit based on one's status, which we'll go into with Alex's comment as well. And the idea being that Ketil is a bit unique in his type of storytelling, as he seems not to be a product of his moral system. He is a coward. Rather, you see his moral privilege in his farmland, his property, and shows all along that he was built by his time, arguably as much as any violent Viking. Most see Ketil as benevolent, using the system to improve lives. He cannot change the system, but instead tweak the system within his territory so people live better lives. Understandable to see him that way due to how he is initially presented. However, the subtext reveals otherwise. And from the start, I was like, this is too good to be true. But everybody was like, oh, Ketil's fine. And I'm like, okay, sure. But then he goes on saying he is more neutral looking. When he speaks about buying Einar, unlike Leif, who cannot fight the norm, but cares about every slave's dignity, Ketil doesn't. Slaves are assets. In episode 26, he talks about the forest not as God's creation. He views it as his future farm, his own creation. And by episode 26, I'm assuming they're referring to like episode 2 of season 2. Combine that with the actual meaning of his hiring-buying process, and you have the average modern corporate entity. Ketil is a businessman who views people as assets to grow his wealth. The growth of his wealth is a sore subject for both himself and his father Sverkel. Sverkel is a traditionalist of Nordic patriarchy, of self-made honor instead of wealth-based dignity. The former ironically fits the anti-violence culture of Christianity that doesn't prioritize acquiring power or wealth to have meaning. And he says, in my opinion, the anime explains their rift better. Ketil was a more passionate man who fell in love with a woman, but lost her to a richer, more powerful man. It explains why he strove to acquire so much wealth. Strength will keep him safe. And in safety, he became a calmer, more gentle person. A comfort zone can allow him to love. Because of the stain of sin ruining our nature, we can only love via discrimination. Tying back to season 1, Canute and Willibald's discourse helps us understand Ketil's privilege. Just as men whip slaves but worship kings, wealthy men can love everyone as long as they're useful to them and keep them at peace. And he has the image of him going to Arnheid. Peacemaking is the central question of farmland starts, and it is fitting how the farmland itself shows why the easy answer, wealth ensures peace, is the worst. Sverkel warns of its danger, and the anime connects this strongly with Gardar's presence as a storm of violence. Ketil strove to be richer than his foe. While he did not use violence, wealth shared one nature with it as power. The line between him and a warrior is ambiguous, as he benefits from war. His location is strategic, close to the forest and easy to monopolize, but also far from his strong foes. Ketil's family speaks about his character too. Sverkel, his father, is the man he refuses to be, one without greed to move forward and progress. Thorgal is the person he becomes when he loses everything. Thorgal also loses a job, but Thorgal receives joy, not misery. There are two forms of escapism. Thorfinn, away from facing a difficult world, and Ketil in a world of control. Somewhere is not here is key. Ketil's paradise is here, and he has power. Without it, he can't see peace. But not here is where Ketil could know people outside of the value that he wants. Olmar is the person that he always was. Except like Job, who lost his wealth in the Bible, he passes his test by being a better person. Olmar overcame his insecurities and idiocy to become a stronger person. Thorgal ironically becomes the Olmar that wanted war, reckless in the pursuit. To those who think Arnheid was loved by Ketil, consider Edith Stein's conceptualization of love. She viewed love as three principles: of being, of knowledge, and of relationship. Two are not here. Arnheid is the comfort of Ketil in a dark world, but she is not seen as her own person. Rather than a principle of being, love becomes abuse. Her feelings are not considered as his is prioritized. Rather than relationship, it is consumption. Arnheid only becomes who she is to Ketil when she is consumed, when she stays. He can only believe in her if she is in his control. Her deal is unfair, and it makes Einar and Thorfinn feel they remain unfree if she isn't. Even when Ketil's kind to them, he does not love. He remains a slave owner, and that truth is what is revealed as he punished Arnheid, not seeing her as pregnant, but as runaway property. It's the true face of the farmland peace, bought for control. When the other becomes their own being, it destroys security because Kettle cannot control them. I'm reminded of how St. Paul talks about slavery in his letter to Philemon to reconcile him and his runaway slave, Onesimus. Paul doesn't directly condemn slavery, but offers Onesimus deeper liberation. The reason a Christian slave had to flee was to show his master his deeper value as a human. Both slave and master were the same under Jesus, so slavery shouldn't be their relation. And then the image that they're quoting says, "But I did not want to do anything without your consent, so that any favor you do does not seem forced by your voluntary. Perhaps the reason he was separated from you for a little while was that so you might have him back forever. No longer as a slave, but better than a slave, as a dear brother. He is very dear to me, but even dearer to you, both as a fellow man and as a brother in the Lord. So if you consider me a partner, welcome him as you would welcome me. If he has done you any wrong or owes you anything, charge it to me. I, Paul, am writing this with my own hand. I will pay it back, not to mention that you owe me your very self. I do wish, brother, that I may have some benefit." The message works for Kettle. In attempting to reunite with Gardar, Arnheid regained her humanity, including the sorrow she tried to escape from. But in Arnheid slipping from his control, Kettle reasserts his true view of her as an object to comfort him from the reality of loss. Arnheid wanted peace from pain, even as Kettle's object, but nothing changed with Kettle when he was with Arnheid. Kettle ultimately kills the slave who would have been liberated from his pain by becoming his true equal, his beloved, not realizing how consumed he was by his sinfulness. And that's pretty much all of that thread, which I absolutely love. And so I'm reminded with Alex Cornejo's comment, where he talks about how we project our own values onto Kettle. That when we see him as being kind, we think, oh, he's a good guy working against the culture that he was put in. But Alex says, and I'm speaking to him verbatim because I really like this comment as well, but in this episode it shows he was a man that knew slavery was wrong, but still engaged in it for personal profit. And his kindness was to assuage his own guilt and is contingent on what he gets out of it. As well as we see Arnheid, and Einar shows that despite his crush on her, despite it all, he drops everything to help her reconnect with Gardar once he realizes that that's her husband and that makes her happy. Kettle, on the other hand, beats her half to death because, quote unquote, how dare she leave him? Like a lion killing cubs because they're possibly not his. And so then I had the thing about that. So yeah, I can't defend Kettle. I can't. And I was told on Twitter about several threads, people had shared images of people defending him. Here's the thing though, a lot of those were like, oh, well, it was of the time. And I'm like, do you realize why Yukimura chose to write a manga about Viking culture? It wasn't just to give you a history lesson. It was more than likely to show that a lot of the themes that are present in this manga still exist today. And we're recontextualizing it and making it digestible by putting it in a historical context. But women are still domestically abused, treated as objects, and treated exactly the same way as Arnheid, whether or not they have the title or label slave. People are still in slavery today in our world, whether or not it's in a history book. And violence still exists and savagery exists, whether or not it's in the form of a war. So I feel like mangaka like Yukimura, they tell stories like this because the themes and the actions are still happening today. They're ways for us to relate to the characters and connect to the message and connect to moments that we can relate to ourselves. And honestly, as someone who has been a victim of sexual assault, I can relate a lot to Arnheid. And I tried to pass it off with humor in the last episode because that's a defense mechanism. That's all I can do. So, and because, as you can see, it gets rather emotional to talk about it. So, I won't talk any more about it, but to say that it is disappointing for someone who is ignorant of the experience of another to truly know what that is like, and to say that it does not still happen or that she deserved it is not only woefully ignorant of the culture around you, but shows your own lack of understanding of what the mangaka is trying to do with this story. So, I could go into more detail, but I would get very upset. And I feel like with it being already nearly 15 minutes into this, we've talked enough. But I feel like that Twitter thread, Alex Cornejo and the others' comments, are so important and telling that I'm very thankful Yukimura shares a story like this. It's heartbreaking, but it's real. And it's sad to me that others either write it off as an unnecessary arc because perhaps they're too insecure, or maybe the people who try to find an excuse for Kettle don't want to admit that they are like Kettle. And they don't want to admit that for themselves. And that's a problem in itself that, you know, they need to look deep inward and kind of rationalize and figure out on their own. But I think that I feel for Thorfinn because he's trying to find this other way. And now tensions are even more high because we have Canute coming, we have a war brewing, and we have Arnheid who's disabled, literally. And what can she do? What can we do for her? So it's horrific. And it leads to a lot of conversations. Some sad conversations because you're sitting there questioning, why are we having this discussion? We should be past this, but in any case. So I'm gonna watch the one first, the 18.5. I'm pretty excited and see what all that's about, and we'll talk about it, and then we'll dive into episode 19. So like I said, this is a long intro, but y'all, I'm excited. So it's only 2 minutes, like a minute and a half for the 18.5. So we'll see what we get. But we're gonna start that here in 3, 2, 1, and let's check this one out. Oh. And Snake. Thorgil and Omar. Uh-huh. He's animated a little bit odd there, isn't he? Ah. Aha, what is not theirs? Haha. Ooh. With blood. Death to the thieves. I feel this lighting is kin to Thorfinn when he was like, might makes right. Uh-huh. Crush the thieves with your righteous strength. The Iron Fist Kettle. Wow. So we're taking up that name now. Oh, okay. And that's it. Ha! Okay. Interesting. So, yeah, So just going back through that little piece there before we start episode 19, obviously Snake and Thorgil and Omar are right beside him, ready to go. And Snake looks less than pleased. Snake's like, I'm just here because they paid me. Thorgil looks excited. Omar looks like he'd rather be anywhere else. He says, King Canute wants to come and seize our land. The lands our forefathers that we inherited, cultivated, and protected. I just have like Pocahontas, Disney's Pocahontas playing in the background being like, you think you own whatever land you land on. Like it just had like, all of a sudden like Colors of the Wind started playing and I was like, But yeah, isn't that funny? Isn't that funny that Kettle's like, this is our land. This is all our stuff. And it's like, the only reason you've kept these lands so far, sir, is because you paid off Harold, who could have came and take them at any time. So isn't that funny? But what's also funny is that Canute, by certain right, believes that these things are his right as well, because he deserves these lands. They're, by his birthright as king, his option to take. He just doesn't want to kill anybody outright at first. He's like, well, let's just talk with them. And if they say no, then I'll slaughter them all and take it for myself. But I don't want to waste. It's so funny because Canute, in that regard, is a lot like Ketil. Because Canute's like, oh, I don't want to waste assets. People are assets. Now, the question is, does Canute truly believe that? Is he really like Ketil, believing that people are just his to use for his own benefit? Or is he just saying that to appeal to the Norsemen that work for him? That's what we need to see. That's why I feel like the confrontation between Canute and Thorfinn is going to reveal, what does Canute really believe? And is he more in line towards Ketil, or is he more in line towards Thorfinn? Because right now he seems like that little in-between, right? Seems like that in-between. But again, he's saying he would use his influence to steal them. And I'm like, well, you used your influence to take those lands originally, so you're no different. He says, the rotten cowards frame me for a crime I did not commit to justify seizing what is theirs. That is true. There's no denying that. But then he says, answer me. How do we repay those who come to steal for your food? And they say, with blood, death to the thieves. What is our way? Might makes right. And again, seen some similar commentary in modern times. So it's a sadly timeless appeal, you know. But interesting. So yeah, that's 18.5. Getting everybody all riled up, feeling very Gaston like rallying the villages against the beast, except this time it's kind of the reverse. They're coming for him there. Okay, so that's what we got. I'm gonna hide this toy so that my dog does not try to get it while I'm watching the reaction. I'm gonna go to from there. So thank you all so much for tuning in this far. Sorry this intro was incredibly long, but we're gonna start episode 19 of Vinland Saga. And to say I'm nervous is an understatement, but we're going to start that here in 3, 2, 1, and let's do this. Whew. That almost got me. That almost got me, show. You almost had me crying again when you realize the moment I saw Arnheid with the baby, I was like, oh my God, the baby's dead. The baby's already dead, and she's about to die, and she's gonna join Gardar and her son and the baby that's dead that's inside of her. Like it's all about to go down. And I was starting to get weepy, and I'm like, they're gonna save it for next episode, I'm sure. He says, I'll wait for you, me and the children. She's gonna die. Damn it. She's gonna die, and the baby's already dead. Oh my God. What can we do? It was just Mother's Day yesterday in the US. I'm like, this is the worst. The timing could not be worse, right? What an episode. This is one of my favorite episodes of the whole season, honestly. There's just so much tension, and it's setting everything up, and there's so much emotion. Snake! I don't want Snake to die, damn it! I don't want Snake to die, but it looks like he might. So, dang it. Oh, man. Just I want Thorfinn and Einar and Leif and Bug Eyes and Pater's out there fighting. Pater's probably going to die. I want Thorfinn and all of them to get out of there. I want him to get off the island. Like, just go. Get off the island. Leave. Don't. Which I'm so curious as to what's going to happen. What are we going to do? Because where do we go? Do they have a boat they can get out there? I'm assuming they have a boat, that Leif's boat's still there. And it's docked maybe on the other side of the island, away from where Canute and them are. That's the only thing I can think of. But I'm like, are they really going to get off the island like they need to? Or are they going to get stopped by Canute? Is Canute going to have a talk with Thorfinn and let Thorfinn go? Are they going to fight Canute? Because Thorfinn doesn't want to fight. my God, we still have so many episodes left of this season. There's so much yet to cover, but I want to go through this episode because we got some revelations that didn't sink in at first, and I was like, wait, oh no. So we pick up right where 18.5 left off. We pick up right where it left off, talking about the Battle of Ketil's farm and Ketil getting all of them together. And I just love how Snake looks like he would rather be anywhere else. Snake's like, this is dumb. Snake's like, this boat's no good. And I like that Fox and them they're like, there's 350 guys here, but only 100 of them are any good in a fight. And you're facing 100, like at first, which Ketil's such an idiot because he's just like, we've got him outnumbered. I'm like, you are a bunch of farming country bumpkins who have no formal training or experience in battle. Snake's like 6 guys or the Magnificent Seven. They're like the only ones that have any battle experience that could do anything, but they can't fight against 100 elite troops of the king, right? And so Ketil's like, oh, we've got 3 times as many men. And I'm like, you're gonna die. Because yeah, you're underestimating the king and his forces, right? And I love that Fox is like, what do we do? And Snake, he's like, are we really doing this? And Snake's like, he's like, the master insists on fighting. So we get a little bit about Snake and why he has no choice and what his debt is that he owes in this situation, which we're going to talk about. He's like, do you think they stand a chance against the king's forces? This part is so fascinating. He says they all owe money to the master. So we talked about at the very beginning of this series, I am going to defend myself because at the very beginning of the series, we talked about the KETIL'S farm. Episode 2 is KETIL'S farm. And we talked about how the system was set up. And there were several people that were like, oh, it's a great deal. He's going to give them their freedom if they work for Ketil for so much time. And I was like, if it sounds too good to be true, it is too good to be true. And yeah, he said that everyone there owes money to Ketil. So they don't have freedom. They just change labels. They go from being a slave to being indebted to. But that freedom is still not there for them. They still can't leave till they pay off Ketil. Till they pay off their loans, they can't leave the island. So yeah, it was a too good to be true scenario. Even though they think they have freedom because they're not slaves, they are still indebted to Ketil and very much under his thumb, right? And he said that whoever shows up and fights is going to get their debts canceled. It's like Ketil is giving out some student loan forgiveness if you show up and battle the system, right? Which sounds great, except when you know the system is armed and ready to go and you have no clue what you're doing. He's like, and it's all strategic. And we find out that Thorgal is the one that thought of the strategy. Thorgal's like, we're going to lure them all here as a mob. The Viking mentality is they're just a bunch of bloodthirsty bros. And when they get here, the mob mentality is going to take over and we'll just rile them up. Not like any modern day situation that you could possibly think of. Right? Talk about relating to modern day reality. But we're going to rile this mob up, get them all bloodthirsty, and get them to go after the king and stuff, not realizing that that's the worst thing you could possibly do. You're going to die. But he's like, he knew if he went like door to door to each individual farmer, they'd be like, oh, hell no, I ain't fighting the king. That seems stupid. But you get them all riled up there together, say you're going to cancel their debt, promise them certain things. Man, Ketil is sounding more and more like a modern day politician. Yeah. Yep. Snake's like, there's no way if they were using common sense and judgment would they agree to do something like this. But Thorgal knew the more of them there are, the bolder they get. And that Viking mentality comes out where they're like, oh, sure, we can take it. They're too proud, you know? So, and Snake's just like, yep, it was all strategy. They feel like they could win. And waiting until they gathered there to tell him they'd be fighting the king was the perfect strategy. Thorgal's a better strategist than I expected. So it wasn't even Ketil's strategy. It was literally Thorgal's. Like, Thorgal is the one plotting out everything because even Ketil doesn't know what's going on. Thorgal's like, oh, Dad, go to the front lines. I got this. We'll join you in battle later. I'm just going to fill Olmar in. And instead he's plotting like an underwater, behind the back ambush. And Olmar's like, I can't do it. You know what? Good for Olmar because I feel like that just saved Olmar's life. I feel like Thorgal is going to get killed. He's going to go in there thinking he's proud and then he can fight Canute and Canute is going to kill him. is what I think is going to happen. I think that's going to be the case, right? Either Canut's going to kill him or Ulf's going to kill him. One of the two, or they both will. Or Floki. Maybe he'll fight Floki, but I don't think so. I think Thorgil's being set up to fight Canute and or Ulf. And Olmar, I'm like, dude, just get out of there, Olmar. Just go. Find Thorfinn and them and peace out. Like, there's no shame in running away from the con artist. We're going to talk about that. But Snake's just like, these guys are idiots. And okay, at the top of the hill, there's Thorfinn looking down on them like he came to go see what was going on, to get the intel and the scoop, to eavesdrop and realize that they're all there gearing up to fight. And like the moment that Snake and Thorfinn lock eyes, I feel like Snake's like, you're not as dumb as you look. Like, I feel like, oh God, show, why are you getting me to ship Snake and Thorfinn? I just got done shipping Einar and Thorfinn. Now you getting Snake in on this? But he's just watching him. Mm-hmm. And so he goes back and basically explains that this place will become a battlefield. Now, I am really sad that we didn't get to see the initial meetup of Leif and Thorfinn. I wanted to see more of that. I am a little bit bummed that we didn't get to see it in full. But we get a moment between them, and that's enough for me. I like this moment between them, as my dog gives me this toy. I like that. They're like, it's just as we told you. We need to leave the farm right away or we'll be caught up in this. Like, Thorfinn, if you don't want to fight, we got to go. And the only thing keeping Thorfinn there was Arnheid and trying to get her out of there, right? And he says, Mr. Leif. Oh, Mr. Leif! Where you're just like, we can't leave the farm with Arnheid in this condition. And I love, he's like, thank you for caring about me. This moment of Leif being like, you've changed so much, Thorfinn. And just looking at him, Thorfinn looking so pure in that moment. He has Thor's eyes. Like him looking so pure, being like, you've changed, Thorfinn. Yeah, he's not a little feral monster anymore. When I first saw you, I thought you were someone else. You know what's so fascinating about that? Is that it's the exact opposite of what happened with Snake and Ketil. Snake, we'll talk about Snake and Ketil, but Snake came to Ketil's farm looking for a man and found the exact opposite in the worst case scenario. And Leif went there looking for Thorfinn and finding him in the best case scenario. He actually finds the real Thorfinn that's been, slowly coming to the surface. And him saying, the look on your face is better these days, Thorfinn. It's just so good. Oh my God. And Leif's like, I finally got to see you. I ain't leaving you. I'm like, I love it. Leif's like, I didn't come all this way, go from how many miles to how many miles, went through how many different run-ins that were proven false to find you and leave you alone now. Nope. I'm glad that Leif has done that, because that is a sign that Leif is not going to leave Thorfinn on the island. He's going to take him with him. He's like, no, we got to go. My only fear is that Leif will die and then Thorfinn will not have that reason for escape, right? But because right now, Thorfinn can kind of attach to something. Like before, he's been kind of like floating like a leaf in the breeze, being like, I don't know where to go or what to do. Even if I was free, I wouldn't know what to do with myself. And now he at least has something to latch onto. And I just don't want that something to go away. So I'm like Thorfinn. But yeah, he's like, Pater, could we move Arnheid? And she's just coughing up blood. I'm like, that's not good. That's not good at all. Like her coughing again. The child inside of her to consider that child's dead. And poor Einar. He's like, we'll just wait one day. And like the one guy's like, really? What do we do after that? And Leif's like, well, then we'll leave. So yeah. We think we have all the time in the world, but we really don't. The winds favored Canute quite well. Colors of the Wind was playing. He was going through it. Like the winds indeed favored Canute. And it's like, oh my God, what do we do? And he said, we're here sooner than expected. So then we get the OP. And the OP looks like it's going to cover pretty much everything. The question is, what is Thorfinn going to do? And so the whole idea of the archers, I'm like, just giving us an understanding of how inexperienced and unready these archers are. They are nowhere close to being ready to handle what's coming. Like just showing the demonstration of them trying to shoot at the boat and missing, and then the arrows getting fired back and hitting a majority of them. And Badger being like, well, shit, we're screwed. And then all of them start to come to shore, all the different soldiers, the Yams Vikings, whatever they're called, we'll see. I know Snake's going to mention here in a second. And then Canute shows up. Canute is the most fabulous and fashionable of them all. Because why wouldn't he be? I love that all these guys are all dressed in these like muted colors, and then Canute shows up in this shining red cape and his purples and greens and blues. Like he just shows up like a damn beacon, right? Like he must be a king. How do you know? He hasn't got shit all over him. That's how you know Canute is living the Monty Python life right now. And then, yeah, he's like, it seems Kettle intends to fight me. But here's the thing. To Canute's credit, he is giving Kettle all the chances in the world. He is he's like, we're going to take a position here. We're going to wait for Kettle to turn himself in. In all reality, Canute is offering Kettle every opportunity to not fight. He's like, if you just turn yourself in, we're done. Now, would Canute keep his word? I don't know. Would Canute keep his word and not fight? I don't know. But he's at least saying that he won't now. He's like, if you just turn yourself in, we won't fight. We won't have a thing. It'll be over. And that'll be that. But, my dog's trying to give me his toy. But Kettle's too proud. And he's got too much built up to stop now. And Canute's saying, this is good land. It'd be a shame to stain it with blood. And I'm like, well, then don't, and that is part of it too, right? Even though Canute is giving every opportunity for Kettle to get out of it, it's sort of in line with Kettle in a sense that, like Alex Cornejo's comment said, that Kettle was complicit in the world of slavery. He tried to mask his guilt and everything by saying, oh, well, I mean, I have slaves, but I'm a good slave owner, even though he's being complicit in slavery. Still doesn't change the fact that you're practicing in it, right? And Canute is similar to Kettle in the sense that he's like, well, I don't want to engage in warfare, but if I have to, it's under a similar vein. Now, I don't think that Canute is exactly like Kettle. I'm not saying that. But some of that, you are complicit in the system, is similar with both Canute and Kettle. They're both complicit in the systems around them. Neither of them are really, truly trying to change the system. Thorfinn seems to want to change the system, right? Canute seems to want to use the system to create a new world. But the problem with that is that will never work. You can't create a world without violence by using violence. Violence begetting violence. Violence does not beget peace. At least not the true peace that Thorfinn wants, right? So there's that. And then we have the Bird of Fate. I thought the Bird of Fate would be tying Canute together with Thorfinn. I was like, that seems to be appropriate. But instead, it's tying the guy coming to speak to Kettle to say, like, you are an insurrectionist and your clan is sent to 10 years of outlawry. That you're normally you'd be executed, but we're going to allow you to live thanks to His Majesty's kindness. And honestly, I mean, Kettle never proud. So phrasing it that way, like, thanks to our king's kindness, he'll let you live. And it's like, that's not the Viking way to accept that, right? If you don't want to die, get out of the country. So, which is rather interesting because Kettle talked about needing hands and needing people to work the farm. So I'm assuming he just assumed that they weren't going to leave, maybe, because why would you give them a free out if you wanted to take them in their land? I don't know. That's curious because he said he wanted to take control of the people and the slaves and have them work for him, but telling them they can all leave, at least he gives them till tomorrow, right? I feel like him giving him a day, he knew that no matter what forces Kettle had, it wasn't going to do anything to the Yams Vikings, anything to his forces. He was just, as a courtesy, offering him the chance to surrender, which is good. I appreciate that Canute was at least offering it. He didn't just show up and slaughter everyone like I'm assuming Sven would. Sven, I'm sure, would show up and just slaughter everybody. I mean, i.e. Thorkel. But in Canute's case, he's like, no, we're going to give him a day, see if they say anything, and then we're just going to go in and roll in like it's our business if they say no. So he at least offers them that chance, right? But Kettle is too proud. He's too proud. He throws the chair. He's like, why couldn't you take them in a fight? And it's like, well, they're a bunch of farmers. What'd you expect? And so he's like, how did Canute's forces look? Now, the thing is, Thorgal should know what they're up against. Thorgal should very well know what they've got. He's like, oh, they've got these 2 tents pitched. I feel like, I'm like, is Thorgal delusional? Does he think that he can actually, or does Thorgal know what they're up against and is like, look, we're going to sacrifice all these farmers and go in from the kill from behind? I feel like Thorgal is the type that he is very willing to sacrifice anybody and anything to achieve victory. So if he even has to sacrifice his dad, he's going to. He's like, if I have to put my dad on the front lines as a distraction while I go and kill Canute, I'll do it. And Olmar's just like, why would we do that? What are we doing? He says they have slaves, 100 men excluding slaves and servants. So yeah, like we don't know how many slaves and servants are there. And they all think that, oh, Canute just brought this small force. Like, we can take them. Like, how few soldiers that they have. And even Kettle's, like, caught up in it. I'm like, you're an idiot. And Snake's like, no, this is bad. They have Thanes, or Thegans. It's Thegans or Thanes. He's like, the guys in the big tent. They're legit the best and strongest men in Denmark, the King's Guard. And then he asks about the men in white capes. And he says that they're Jomsvikings, and Snake knows exactly what that word means. Fascinating. So I'm very curious if Snake ever talks to Leaf, and Leaf says that Thorfinn is a son of a Jomsviking, what that would mean, like what Snake would react to. I want Snake to live so badly, but I don't know if he's going to. I want Snake to make it out alive, but he is on the front lines, and I just don't know. I don't think Snake's going to live. And that bums me out so much. We had sudden backstory in this episode, and sudden backstory is usually a sign a character's going to die. I'm like, damn it. Damn it. So in any case, and Snake is kind of like amused by the fact that Fox is like, he's amused by the fact that Fox is so freaked out by the Jomsvikings. I want to point out how Snake can be so calm when they're faced with an adversary like that. He's like, I like the Snake's like, isn't it funny you think that you know what the Jomsvikings are? Yeah, we're screwed. We're boned. It's over. He's like, we can't beat them. They far outclass our ragtag group of peasant soldiers. So he's gearing up with the chainmail, with all of the different padding. Snake's like, I'm getting myself prepped and ready to go. They're the kind of guys who think about war and nothing else from morning until night. Like, he has firsthand experience dealing with them. And he's like, look, Canute's given... looking back, I said that whenever Snake was getting mad at Gardar for killing his men, I was like, I don't know if Snake cares about his men, because he kind of like gave him a hard time. But these last couple episodes, looking at the way that Snake interacts with Fox and the others, the more we're around Snake and the more the layers start to come unpeeled with his character, the more you realize that no, Snake really does care. He does care about them. And he cares about all of them to the point where he doesn't want them to die. And he gives them the out. He's like, you guys can go. He's like, I have my reasons for staying here, but you all, I don't want you getting drug into this if you don't want to. He says, I'll do my best to keep as many of these 350 cocky idiots alive as I can. He's like, it's basically saying the captain has to go down with the ship. He's like, I assumed this responsibility of leadership, so I have to stay and make sure that I can try my best to keep them alive because that's my duty. So in the weirdest sense, Snake is very honor bound. He's very bound to duty and honor, which is, again, his name being Heavy, is so weird and interesting, right? It feels like Heavy. There were several female reactors that were shared in the Discord about the last episode, and there was one that I really resonated with. Her righteous anger was very true. Which is funny here that Kettle frames this fight as a righteous fight. I'm like, when were you religious, sir? It's not your divine right to have this land. But the one girl reactor that they shared, which I'm glad there are female reactors of Vinland Saga. I'm not the only one. I'm glad. But she was giving a really heated rant about Snake and Snake being complicit in the system. And it's like, yes, he is. And that's a problem. I feel like Snake is writing this very interesting line where he's kind of like Askeladd a lot, where Askeladd rode the line between ethical and immoral. Like just there's a weird sense of duty and justice that Askeladd had. And Askeladd was more, what's interesting, what separates him and Snake is that Askeladd was more, I feel, into the morality of things rather than the duty or ethics. Askeladd was more into how a situation made him feel or connected to his emotions versus whether or not it was ethically right or not. And for Snake, it seems less tied to his emotions and what he believes to be moral or not, and more tied to duty and the system and the society that he's working within. So that's kind of interesting. There is a similarity between Askeladd and Snake, definitely, but they are different in how they view the system and their sense of duty, which is fascinating to me, right? Very interesting. So he says he's just going to go down with the ship. Like Askeladd wouldn't have gone down with the ship. Askeladd had been like, peace up, A-Town, bye. The only time Askeladd was devoted to the system was putting Canute in place of the crown, right? But that was also to Askeladd's own agenda. So there was a reason behind it. Snake doesn't seem to have his own agenda. He's just trying to uphold what he believes are debts that he owes. And Fox says, well, he's like, what can we do? Fox is like, if we leave, he's like, what if we just catch Kettle and them? What if we tie him up and give him to Canute? Then all this would be over. And the one guy's like, are we going to tie up Thorgal? Because he'd be really hard to tie up. We'd need a lot of rope. And he's like, I bet the 8 of us could take him. And that's when this guy that looks like Merlin meets Stevie Nicks' husband says that you heard he beat a bear to death with his bare hands, Kettle. Iron Fist Kettle. And that is when Snake reveals something very interesting. We get Snake backstory because they ask him to run away. And I like Snake's little tiny ponytail. Like, it's shorter than mine. It like sticks up, the tiny ponytail. It's so cute. Like with his little helmet and his ponytail. He's like, run away with us, boss. And he says that Iron Fist, I know all about the Iron Fist. He says, I was around 15 or 16 when I met him, and he taught me how to fight on the battlefield. So the Iron Fist Kettle is an actual person, right? Or at least the Iron Fist is a real person. He exists. He trained Snake to fight at an early age when he was 15 or 16. Then he said it was insanely strong. And he says he was like an older brother or a boss to me. And he looks so fond when he's thinking back on that. Like, that's such a fond memory of his past. Like, he gets really nostalgic about it. And when he got to this point, I was like, oh, well, that explains why he was with Spherical all the time. Because Kettle was like a boss to him. He was like a brother, a boss. Makes sense, right? But then the story keeps going. And he says, years ago, I screwed up. So he was 15 or 16 when he met Iron Fist. So I'm going to assume that Snake is probably like in his 30s. So probably a decade or so has passed. So he's like, so he says probably when he was like in his early 20s, he's like, I screwed up. I made a mistake. I ended up on the run because of something I did. And I thought Kettle would shelter me because we went way back. So I followed the rumors to this farm. So he followed the rumors that the Iron Fist had settled on this farm, right? And he says, but when I finally arrived, and then he turns around, he's like, who are you? What business do you have with me? I found a completely different person. And at first, I thought he meant that Kettle had changed. Like Kettle had started out as this warrior and then retired and became a farmer. But no, that's not what he's suggesting at all. He's suggesting that this Kettle completely fabricated that he was the Iron Fist everybody knows about. For all we know, the real Iron Fist died in battle, and he's just taken his name and his persona and all of his fame and been like, oh yeah, I'm Iron Fist for sure. And nobody knows the wiser. And then everybody's like, oh shit. They're like, this was all a con. And Snake's happy about it. He's just like, yeah, isn't that the most messed up thing you've ever heard? It was all a lie. And he just laughs. He's like, the master's full of shit. He's taking advantage of the fact that they share the same name. So yeah, he is completely taking the where is that ball? I don't know where it is. He's like, he is taking complete advantage of the fact that they both have the same name and using it to make himself appear like somebody that has all this notoriety. And the funny thing is that with Viking culture, names are a big thing. But do the Vikings really care what they look like? Right? I mean, do they know Askeladd and Thor's by their appearance or by name alone? By their skill? So, the fact that Thorfinn was part of Askeladd's army, did anybody really care because Thorfinn's name wasn't thrown out? It's not Thorfinn's name that had notoriety, so they wouldn't remember or know. So I think that's so interesting that Ketil's able to get away with it because of a flaw in the system, that people don't pay attention to what you look like just by your name. And who would be ballsy enough to take the name of the Iron Fist Ketil unless it was him? But, maybe Ketil got onto the fact, he found out that the real Iron Fist died, and he's like, I'm going to take that name up. Sure thing. But yeah, that's so wild. And Fox is like, that's appalling. I'm amazed he's never been exposed. And he said, with nowhere to go, I stayed here as his guard dog. So he has been here for a long time. He's been here for a long time as his guard dog because he had nowhere else to go. And that kind of relates back to Thorfinn and Einar's thing of, even if you're free, where do you go to? What do you do when you have no home, right? And so in Snake's case, he kind of was like Einar and Thorfinn in that he had nowhere to go. And so he just was like, I guess I'll just stay here because otherwise he's like, I'm not free to go anywhere I want to because I'm on the run. So I'll just stay here. That's so crazy. I stayed here as his guard dog. And he's like, I took advantage of the situation. And he's like, I've been getting a free ride for long enough. It's time to pay my tab. And he basically says, what he's saying there is that, yeah, I've taken advantage of this old man for all these years. Even though I've been his guard dog, I've had it good. I've not been a slave. He's paid me. I've got to eat. I've got to, at my leisure, learn to read the Bible. I've gotten to do all these things without having to be a servant. Even though I was on the run, even though I took advantage of this man, I've done it for years without any debts. And so he's like, if I leave now, what kind of person am I? And so he just, by his constitution, he can't do it. And so he tells the other guys, he's like, you all can go. He's like, all I meant is the master is a con artist that's not worth dying for. He's like, this man ain't worth dying, but I've got my reasons for staying. You all don't have to. And then, as he walks away with a little feather and one feather in his cap and the little wooden shield and the spear, those guys aren't going to leave him. They're like, come on, bro. We're not leaving you to die alone. Mm-mm. And he almost seems mad that they're joining up. There's 6 of them, so they're literally like the Magnificent Seven, right? They really are like the 7 samurai, sort of. They're like, we're not leaving you. Come on. Don't try to show off. And he's like, dying and dashing on a con artist would make us absolute scumbags. Like, Ketil's bad enough. So if we just dine and dash on him, what does that say about us? Well, I would be like Einar and Thorfinn and leave anyway. And so, yeah, and then old Canute doesn't need a helmet. He's just going to stand there and look hot. He's just going to stand there and look good. And so what I find so fascinating is that we cut to Thorgal and Olmar. And Thorgal is not, delusional might not be the right word, but he is so oblivious to the fact that Olmar could care less about any of this. Olmar doesn't want to be involved in any of this, but nobody's paying attention. Nobody's reading the social cues, the nonverbal language. Nobody's seeing that Olmar looks like he's in hell. And nobody seems to be reacting to that. Thorgal thinks that he'd find this all fascinating, this strategy, but Olmar's like, I just want to leave. And so it just shows how little Thorgal really understands about Olmar. It's really sad. He's like, they've beached their ships and they're completely undefended. They don't know we have the proper forces. Like, he's just getting so excited. And now Olmar says, in broad daylight, they're easy to spot. He's like, how would you attack? And Olmar says, well, would you attack at night? And Thorgal does bring up a good point. He's like, no, because unless you're experienced, amateurs fighting at night won't know the battleground. They won't know the formation. That it'll all fall to pieces. He's like, that's not a good idea. So instead, what his idea is that we're going to gather all these people together, these country bumpkins, send them to the front lines, and they'll serve as the distraction. He's like, isn't it obvious? He's like, come on, Olmar, don't you get it? We're going to have all these people die to serve as a distraction for us to come in and take care of Canute. And Olmar's just like, that sounds like a terrible idea. Nope. And the worst part is, Ketil has no clue where Thorgal is. Ketil's like, where's my sons? Where are they? And Thorgal's like, old man, we're sacrificing you. You'll keep yourself safe, right? You're the only one with a horse. You're fine. As soon as they kill that horse, Ketil's done as soon as the horse goes down. And I like that Snake tries to warn him one last time. He's like, if we fight them, we're going to lose. And Ketil's like, the great Iron Fist Ketil's a match for that youngster in every way. And Snake's like, you're so full of shit. I love it. I love that look I love that look that Snake's like, you are absolutely ridiculous. Like, no, not gonna work. So then, meanwhile, and Pater's out there. I don't want Pater to die, but he could die too. I'm like, damn it. Thorfinn's like, Pater is buying them time. Pater is distracting them so nobody goes looking for him. I like that Bug Eyes throughout all of this. Bug Eyes is so... he's so, just eyebrow raised the whole time. Like, this is just a disaster. Through and through, right? Just a disaster. And Einar's like, keep the cart as slow as you can go. And Bug Eyes is like, I'm going to do my best. He's like, you get things done when you have to, don't you, Leaf? And Leaf's like, I already paid for her, so we're fine. She's Thorfinn's friend. We can't abandon her. And they didn't get to say goodbye to Spherical. So that does make me sad. It's like, well, where is Spherical in all this? I guess he's back on the farm, so he's probably going to die. Unless they go back to get him, which... I don't know if they will or not. And then we cut to her, going through the forest. And she sees Hajalti, in her lap. And then there's the other baby there, too. She sees Hajalti, and she sees the little baby, the little blonde baby. Oh. So damn sad! And he says, are the children asleep? And in her mind, Gardar is totally accepting of the other child. Right? The little blonde one. And she's like, yes, they are asleep. Oh. We can't tell if it's a boy or a girl, but the rocking of the cart put them to sleep so quickly. And then I love that he says that this forest is a place, these dark woods will be out of them soon. It's so damn sad because he's saying you've been through all this pain and suffering and despair and we're about to be through this darkness into the light together and we'll all be together in the warmth of the sunlight. Isn't that the saddest thing you ever heard of? He's like, this place, he's like, it's not fit for life. Just beasts wanting blood live here. We have a warm home waiting for us. But then she sees the wolf and the stag. And her lip trembles. And she says, but. And she looks at them side by side. They're still here. And what's so interesting, lives still try to survive here. I don't know in the animal comic that they use to represent, for fun. They have a comic strip they put out after each episode for fun. In that comic strip, Einar is a mule. And Thorfinn is a cat, and Canute is a polar bear, right? But here we have the elk and the wolf. And what's interesting is I don't think the elk and the wolf represent any specific character. But I think what's interesting is the elk and the wolf represent two opposing forces, two predators, a predator and prey, that are both trying to survive in the same world. Like there's always, it's almost like a representation saying, she's like, yes, we could escape the pits of despair where all of these predators are looking for blood. We can escape that despair when we move on to the next life and we die. She's like, that's one way of thinking about it. But she's like, regardless of what happens, there are still going to be people left behind. There are still people in this world trying to survive and live. And she's like, and there are wolves and elk trying to live in the same place at the same time. There's always going to be a predator and prey. But how can they coexist? That's just so beautiful. That imagery of showing the wolf and the elk side by side. Lives are trying to survive here. And we see the light. And she looks towards the light. And then I love when he looks back at her. And he says, tell them, the ones who looked after you, farewell. And that moment where he looks at her. Oh. Like just, it's so heartbreaking. Because in that moment, he's just basically being like, I'll be waiting for you here with the children. It hurts so much because, yeah, it's just suggesting that the kids are dead. And she's like, okay, I'll go back and tell them goodbye. I need to thank Einar and the others. And then she wakes up, and of course, Einar like has them stop the cart to see her, being like, it's Einar. She's gonna die. Yeah, she's gonna die, damn it. She's gonna say goodbye to them and die. Meanwhile, it's like, did you remember the violence of season 1? It's back. It's back with a vengeance. People are getting their heads split open, and it's gory and bloody and awful. And everybody's dying, and Floki's like they don't even, like, nobody's making a dent in the soldiers that are attacking. And Canute now has his helmet on. So Canute has this amazing, like, wicked helmet that has, like, the teeth coming out from it. It looks terrifying. It has, like, the extra eyes. It's so creepy. It's a very creepy helmet. He says, we'll use the second line of Thins to capture Ketil. And then Ketil's wondering where his sons are. Olmar can't swim. He can't swim with the sword on his back. He can't do it. He can't be like Thorgal. And meanwhile, Thorgal thinks that he's like damn Jaws sneaking up on Canute, being like, oh, I found you. I'm like, oh my God. And there we are. Oh my God. And that's the episode. So yeah. Oh man. So yeah. I think Arnie's gonna die. And then what do our guys do? Do they leave? I hope they leave. There's no reason for Einar and Thorfinn to stay. Leif is no good in battle. Bug Eyes is no good in battle. Einar's not experienced enough. Thorfinn could maybe defend them. If the only thing Thorfinn can do is, as they're on the run, Einar and Thorfinn can possibly defend the group from an outside, like, random attack. But otherwise, they're going to do nothing against the 100 Yams Vikings in them. There's just no way. There's no way. They need to leave. They need to get off the island and go. Like, Ketil's farm was fun. Glad we were here for season 2. Let's peace out and get out of here. This was not the paradise. The princess is in another castle, Mario. Let's go. They just need to leave. And just go. So yeah, and I don't know what's going to happen to Spherical. I don't want Snake to die, but I feel like he's going to die. I feel like Pater's going to die. I don't want all these characters to die, and I feel like that's going to happen because we've got Snake's backstory, enough of it. And then Pater is just probably going to get killed. I feel like Thorgal's going to die, so I don't know if Olmar is going to get out alive or what's going to happen with him, if he's going to turn himself in. What's going to happen there. But Ketil, I'm sure, is going to die. So there's just going to be we still have episodes 20, 21, 22, 23, and we have 5 episodes left. And that's lots of time for many people to die, so I'm very curious to know your thoughts down below, what you all thought of this episode, but there's a lot of things at work, and all I can say is I am really, really excited to see what happens next week. So in the meantime, I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I'll be back next week with more of Vinland Saga.